Hi everyone. I'm also, this is a little awkward as well because I have only had a couple interactions with the MLH crew, and I'm quite a few years removed from college. So I don't, I'm going to try to be relatable, but you have to pardon me if I don't necessarily translate everything in terms of my references. But I can just get started going. I can just get going with my prepared slides. It's gonna take me like half an hour-ish, and then we can do half an hour of questions. Does that sound good? And then, yeah, just like feel free to pause me if like there's any technical difficulties or anything, because I can only see my screen.
Sounds good. And you can also, as we're going, if you have questions we can address later, you can pop those into the chat, or you can also unmute if you have a question as well.
Yeah. Oh, I can also share the slides if that helps people, because that tends to help. So let me try to figure out where in Zoom. Zoom has so many buttons these days. It just keeps growing. So these are the slides, and feel free to zip along if you want. And I'm just gonna zip ahead and present. So yeah, hi. This is something that I never thought I would kind of write about or specialize in. It essentially was an outcome of my blogging and like people really responding to some of the stuff that I've written for them. And it's essentially like sort of the meta code stuff around code that you learn as you go along, that nobody teaches you. Like when you tend to think about coding careers, like your career as a software developer, as just about code, when really like it's maybe 25% about code, and there's a lot of other stuff around that. So this is kind of like what I ended up doing in between jobs. Like I wrote essentially like a list of essays that became a book, and that's the whole idea. And I was invited to do a talk with you guys about it. So I'm going to share what I have right now. And I'd love to go into further detail because there's just too much to go into it with you in 30 minutes. So I'm Swyx. I also go by Shawn. I used to have a career in finance, changed careers in 2017, did a boot camp instead of like a proper CS degree. Went into Two Sigma, Netlify, and now I just recently joined AWS. And we already talked about the other stuff. One of my other roles, if you're into front-end development at all, is that I'm a r/React.js subreddit moderator. And I think we're about to hit 200,000 subscribers tomorrow. So that's pretty exciting as well. So what this attempt is, I just want to situate this among the other advice and the other books that you've heard about as seen. A lot of books are very sort of point in time solutions, essentially. Like they'll target like learn to code, or like crack the coding interview, or like solve the algorithm design, or like do your great resume, or write about clean code, and so these are like just sort of very point in time solutions, but they don't really help you with the transition steps. And so what I essentially tried to do with this book was essentially lay out things which are principles, which are basically like always on default decisions, strategies, which help you decide based on one-off big uncertain irreversible decisions, and then tactics, which are things that you use frequently throughout your career. So that's kind of the way that we're going to break it down. And yeah, so basically like there's 4 parts to what we sort of how I sort of break it down. And the first is kind of the career guide. And one of my sort of obsessions is the OSI layer. I think if you're doing a lot of tech interviewing, I think that's one of the first models that you'll come across, from essentially like the network layer all the way up to applications. And I don't remember what the other 5 layers are, but I was always thinking like, what if there's an OSI layer for humans as well? So instead of just protocols and data, we can also talk about how humans form a chain of value from machines all the way to end users. So we have here the entire universe of coding careers, going from, I guess, people who work the closest of hardware, like operating system devs or embedded or IoT devs, all the way up to people who don't actually code technically, traditionally, if you think about that. They might be considered no code, low code. They might muck with settings which have some sort of conditional logic, whatever. That's kind of the mental framework. Most of us developers are actually going to live around here, between applications for the front end and services for the back end. if you aspire to be more of like an infrastructure or cloud person, you might work in the lower layer on the sort of platform level. And that's kind of how I split things. You may have a different split, but I think it's good to have a mental model, because the way that you interview or plan your career for each of these levels is very, very different from each other. So I think that's an also an interesting mental model to have when you sort of approach these things. Next, this is more about the job searching thing. Quite frankly, if since all of you are in the MLH fellowship, I don't think this applies to you at all, because you're going to sail through your job hunting task. But I think I recommend this blog post from Hasib Qureshi, where he talks about like the mathematics of job hunting. And it's essentially the same as the birthday problem, where you don't actually need 365 people in the room to have a good chance of two people having the same birthday. You actually need, because the probabilities compound. Same reasoning for applications, and because you only need one job offer out of all the applications that you send out. So that's kind of job hunting advice 101. I know it's very simple. Numbers matter, right? The other thing I think to think about when it comes to job hunting, especially for new grads and people who are just like kind of getting their first experiences without a network, is that you can choose a wide range of strategies between narrow and sort of, I guess, wide. Some people go as far as high as 200 to 300 applications. And for me, that I prefer to do 9. I prefer to do a more narrow search. And it's really up to you, the kind of sort of search strategy that you choose. But just be aware that obviously if you spread yourself out very thin, then you're not going to do a very high quality application on each one. Whereas the narrow application, you may not actually explore the full space of possibility that might be a best fit for you. So there's downsides to both and upsides to both. I think the most important thing to do during the job search is basically to have continued discipline and motivation. So one way to do it really well is to have social pressure, like to have a small group of friends and do stand-ups with them, and say what you did, what you plan to do, and then just like consistently meet up until you all get jobs. The other thing I think that people neglect to talk about is that's the longitudinal process. But what about during the day? That's kind of what I call time splits, how you sort of organize your time during your job search. I won't go too far into details, just because I also don't expect you to face much of a trouble with this. I think in terms of like portfolio pieces and like proving yourself, this is Meko Okereke from Google. He's a very experienced hiring manager, and and I think what he says here is very true. So I'm just going to quote verbatim. You can impress most hiring managers with only 3 contributions. Something simple, just like one class, a single JS file, but just like show your best work. Something complete, where you show like all the other stuff, like tests, like architecture, docs, whatever. And then something with a story, where you can actually stand out in terms of your personality, or like something interesting that sets you apart from just a raw technical skill. And I have more stuff in this with regards to the hiring funnel. Let me know if you're interested in all of this. I'm just going to skip past this because that's not the focus of this presentation. I'm going to highlight this one, might as well. Twitter is surprisingly central. It may not be for your cohort right now, but as far as I'm concerned, in all the developer circles I see, Twitter is very central. And if you can pitch yourself in 280 characters, you get to be spread by a lot of these other developers who are looking to elevate you as well. So that's very helpful for the job search again. Okay, so more interviewing resources. You don't need this. You don't need this. I also studied a bunch of junior to senior dev stuff, and that's a whole chapter which I can get into. Again, like I'm not going to spend too much time here, but we can go into it during Q&A if that's something that's of interest to you. I think the goal for you in particular is that you're getting a lot of explicit knowledge, in your courses, and that's stuff that people have written down, like books, docs, talks, like stuff that people know that they know, and they've taken time to share with you. But there's especially now during your fellowship and in your projects and later on in your jobs, like you're going to be picking up a lot of tacit knowledge, the stuff that you only learn on the job, because you have to live through it to experience it. And that's actually the majority of like a software engineer's sort of value add, right? Like the stuff that's not in the book. And so I think anytime that you have the ability to to expand the possibility boundary of like that space between explicit and tacit knowledge, that's a really good thing to actually start writing down, whether it's for people who are coming in the cohort after you, or just like your past self. That's always very helpful, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this whole project, which is kind of just to relay things that I've learned as a I guess now senior software engineer. So that brings us to the principal strategies and tactics section. Sorry, I'm kind of rushing too much, to be honest. I should probably pace it a little bit. Okay, so why principles? I strongly recommend checking out this book by Ray Dalio. He runs his entire hedge fund based on principles, and it's this idea that it's okay to make mistakes, but it's not okay to make them repeatedly. You should, every time you like learn something fundamental about how the world works, how you work, how you prefer to work with the world, you should write it down, and you should sort of stack rank them so that whenever they come into conflicts, you have some way to resolve conflicts, or you have some idea that these are two principles that are at odds, and you need to find some other unifying principle to deal with all of them. So for me, the one principle that I'm most known for is to learn in public. It's this idea that most developers are trained from the beginning to learn in private. That everything that you retain, you're tested on. You keep it to yourself, and the way that you get ahead in life is that you do that better than the people around you, and it's a very zero-sum view of things. And I think that if you open your mind up to sort of like a more growth mindset, where you can share what you learn, and you yourself learn faster as a result of that, because people get the chance to correct you. You get the chance to be wrong in public, and you build your network at the same time. So that's a very short summary of what has become like a movement as far as developers are concerned. And you can check the essay out at swyx.io/LIP. But that's the core idea that I think, especially for you as students, you're going to start to transition, and when you transition from sort of the sort of zero-sum world of college to to sort of the more positive sum world of I guess real world collaboration, you'll see that the kind of games that we play in real life is kind of very different from the sort of academic competitions that you might be used to. It certainly was a huge learning for me. And the other thing, I guess, that I would share with you is, I used to be in finance, and we so I worked in investment banking and hedge funds, and the intellectual property that we had, that I worked on, that was some of the best work of my life. I put, I laid it all out at the hedge fund, and when I walked away from finance, that stayed with them. Like that was property of the fund and never with me, and I'll never see it again. When I interviewed with other funds, I couldn't take that with me to interview with. So it just made it really hard to sort of transfer experience, and that makes it really hard for you to scale. Whereas I think in tech, we're fundamentally more open. We're encouraged to share our learnings in blogs and conferences, and even our failures as well. We also share our outages and our sort of retrospectives of our failures. And I think if we don't take advantage of the fundamentally more open nature of tech, then we're kind of missing out on what's so great about this industry. So I do tend to encourage people a lot to be more public about what they do. It's really good for compounding your skills and knowledge and network. So I include a bunch more principles, and again, we don't have a lot of time to go into all of them. The other thing I think I do tend to encourage people on is to open source your knowledge. So basically, it's this idea that open source code has, open source code didn't used to be the norm. It's this revolution now that, most things that we use is now by default open source. And I think that's something that's happened very successfully with code, but we haven't done that a lot with knowledge, like the sort of architectural and principles and other sort of less computer savvy skills, but the sort of more meta skills around our knowledge. One of the ways in which I sort of exemplify this is my work with React and TypeScript. So I essentially run the community React and TypeScript docs, and that was mainly because React wasn't doing a good job of documenting its interaction with TypeScript. TypeScript was not doing a good job of documenting React. So I came in and did the intersection. And I think what that experience taught me was that became a community and a repo of knowledge, and that was more that compounded way better than a set of individual blog posts, because that has a individual decay in terms of the value. So it's just like you rather choose to have this one asset that you just compound in value over time, rather than this blog where you just have little bits and pulses of value as you put out blog posts. And I think that comparison between open source knowledge, that you have some sort of obviously the most successful example is Wikipedia, that one spot where everyone just funnels in and contributes knowledge and builds up the best single example of one thing, is actually more valuable than a series of one-off events. So I think, I've taken too many words to explain that, but I think that's the rough gist of it. So that's principles. Principles are things that you should always default to in absence of anything else. But a lot of times you also have to think about the strategy of your learning, your career, and your technology. And those are the ways in which I want to encourage people to think more strategically instead of following whatever preset plans that you see other people let you do. You need to take more ownership of your career, right? So in terms of learning strategy, I talk a little bit about this concept of learning gears, how you should behave differently based on the type of things that you're trying to learn. The way that you learn when you don't know what you don't know is very different. That's your explorer gear. It's very different from the way that you learn when you know things that others don't know. That's your teaching gear, your connector gear. And then that's even more different from the way that you behave when you find something that is super important that you're obsessed by, and no one else is working on it. So you're diving deep into something that nobody else does, and that's valuable. So that's kind of like your minor gear. It's also, I always think about it as your builder gear. And these are all just different ways of different modes of learning, but that gives you permission to behave differently. So it's like a shorthand as far as people who do this are concerned, to convey the kind of outputs and commitment level that they should be adopting. So, for example, Explorer, nobody really expects that much from explorers. Explorers are just putting out notes to themselves, whereas miners are kind of putting out infrastructure, R&D, communities, and they build out things to last years and on the order of years in careers, which is pretty, I guess, a fundamental insight for people who have dabbled in all these things, and they kind of view them all as the same thing. They're not. They really differ based on the kind of gear that you're into. The other thing, I think, in terms of people specializing, a lot of people are debating this idea of specialist versus generalist, and everyone basically converges on this idea of a T-shaped model employee. This is from the Valve handbook. So if you see this a lot, that's where it actually comes from, the makers of Half-Life. And I tend to not be very inspired by this, basically because it's not useful. Everyone is some form of T-shaped employee. So we're all specialists in some ways and generalists in others. And I think the more insightful thing is where to bet on technologies. So I don't have a slide here for that, but essentially we can get into that if you're interested in my thoughts on that. Career strategy. Did you know that a lot of companies actually publish their career ladders in public? So what if you just went through and studied every career ladder out there? That's exactly what I did. So here's the spreadsheet. I might as well just share it with you, because I'm not publishing this just yet. So you're actually the first to see this, because I figured, why not? I'll just share it with you. What if we just went through and compiled every career ladder of every company, and we tried to see what was the similarities among the different levels? And you can start to plan out a roadmap for yourself in terms of your personal development. So that's essentially what we did over here in this research project, and that's kind of what I wrote up in the chapter on career ladders. But you can see how it's hard to put and in any concrete terms whatsoever, some unified general theory of coding careers, except when people actually specifically lay out their ladders, and you can do something like this where you can just like normalize them across all the different companies. So it's an interesting exercise, and it definitely gives you a map of what your career could look like over a super long term. Like we're talking 10, 20 years. And so these are not the kind of conversations that you normally have, but I think it's worth having, right? So that's what you think about when you start to think strategically. Then the last bit of strategy, I also want people to think about the business of software, like the business of tech, how money is made from your tech, and that directly affects the companies you choose to work at, the projects you choose to work at within the company, the technologies that you choose to bet on, the technologies you use day to day. These are all affected by tech strategy decisions. So we talk a little bit about the difference between horizontal versus vertical industries. Like all industries start vertical and then they horizontalize as they specialize. Then we talk about business models as well, like agencies, advertising, subscription. Basically, a lot of things start vertical and then they split out. So here's the famous chart of how Craigslist is being split out into all these different small startups, and all of them are worth like billions each. We also talk about megatrends like gaming. So one of the things that I think you guys are probably more aware to, because you're in that demographic, whereas I guess people in my generation and older may not be that aware of, is that the sheer explosion in terms of the gaming industry is unmatched compared to all the other media industries, and there are strong reasons for that, and I can go into why. But if you kind of view all these industries as the same, like working for Spotify is kind of the same thing as working for Tencent, or what's the other gaming company that I'm blanking on right now? Whatever. But like, these industries are performing differently, and I think it behooves you to bet strategically based on the industry if you care about these things in terms of your own career. The other thing I think to be aware of is sort of tech adoption curves. So we talk a little bit about crossing the chasm, like those classics, but also the fact that technology adoption is accelerating. Like it took us this long to adopt a telephone, but now we're adopting technology at a much faster rate in terms of your population percentages. So these are all very interesting ideas that people really talk about when it comes to strategy. And I'm not going to talk about this. This is wordly mapping. Okay. And then last part is tactics. I think people are always interested in like small things that they can do to improve. So I collect, for example, this list of nice design tips. Developers are always interested in design tips. I'm not the best at design myself, but I think if I can spend like 5 minutes to like, bump up the look of my thing, that increases the people who will try my stuff out, and their enjoyment of my products, then that's actually a very high ROI activity to do. There's also this idea of like, there's also sort of workplace tactics that you can sort of employ. So for example, when you're we're often told that knowledge is power, but sometimes we can actually turn ignorance into power as well. And that's a lot of what I call lampshading, like just calling attention to your biggest weakness so that no one else can, and then making that into a strength because of your position, your positional advantage. For example, if you're very junior or you're very senior, you're allowed to not know things. And I think that fundamental assumption helped me a lot in my first job as a dev. And then writing's a huge skill for just compounding your learning and your knowledge and your reach. Part of the reason I'm speaking to you today at all is because I've written a bunch of stuff, and I think the way that people view writing is they don't take it very seriously. If you intend to be a knowledge worker at all, you need to store your knowledge and you need to scale your knowledge. And a lot of that takes place through writing because it's the most scalable medium compared to everything else. So that's what we have in terms of like writing strategy. And I can go into more detail about this as well, but I don't want to sort of bombard you with too much. And then I think the last piece that I always touch on that strikes a chord with a lot of developers is that they need to market themselves. And it's very much, I think people aware of the idea that if you build it, they may not come. Like a lot of developers have this idea that like, okay, whenever I do any project, to do any startup, I'm just going to do a bunch of code first, and then at the end, I'm going to poke out of my hole and just say, all right, it's done, and then you get crickets because nobody knows what you work on, and you haven't spent any time on the marketing. So I think it's the same thing with regards to your own coding skills. Like if you just become the best coder that you can possibly be, but you never spend any time on marketing yourself, no one's going to know how awesome you are. So you do owe it to yourself a little bit to market yourself in public and at work as well. So that's that. I kind of end the book with a sort of coda for sustainable careers. So I think there's a lot of I guess developers struggle with burnout in our industry, and we need to have a way to sort of pick up all these loose ends and sort of tie them together into something that unifies our the full stack of what we are, from our personal selves to other people's image of us. I think imagine, and the way I kind of pitch this is that we need to have an operating system that runs all these principles, strategies, and tactics. So these are all like applications of what we are. But even if we had the answer to everything, the reason that we don't actually benefit as much as others from them is because we don't have a system to implement them, to make that as effective as possible. So I actually end the book with a little call to action to take care of the small things, like the health, small but huge, health, your own personal scheduler, your internal motivation and drive. These are all important things that I think are essential. And I've given a separate talk on that. It's called The Operating System of You. And I think, we should all think about how we deal with, unlimited applications, but limited resources. And that's essentially what operating systems do. And we could take our learnings from how I think we've developed to a science how operating systems do that, and we could take that learning and apply it on how we govern our own lives. And I think that's a very interesting analogy that we can explore as well. So I've been talking nonstop for half an hour, but that's the idea. That's the book site. If you want to go check it out, there's 4 free chapters on there that give you more of a sense. But I'm not here to sell the book. I'm here to have a real chat with you on whatever topic you want. My time is yours, and I'm happy to take questions. It says you need access. You need to make it shareable. Okay. What do I need to make shareable? I need to make shareable the
I think it's the spreadsheet.
Oh, the spreadsheet. Okay. Spreadsheet. I see. Give me 1 second. Let me just, I can't, I'm getting a whole bunch of dings when I type stuff into Zoom. There we go. All right. Okay, this is shareable now. So let's see. Cathal. If you've worked with junior developers, what's the biggest mistake you see them making, and how would you go about solving it if you're in their shoes? So biggest mistake, I think, is feeling like you have to pretend you know more than you do. Which is kind of the idea of lampshading, which is this sense of, you're a junior developer, you want to show that you have value and you are competent. So when people ask you to do stuff, or if people ask you that whether you understand stuff, you say that you do. That actually, people will take you at your word, and they'll trust that you know what you're talking about. And if it turns out that you don't, or it turns out that you're missing knowledge in some way, there's 2 things that happen. Like, one is you miss out on a teaching opportunity. Like, people teaching you things that you already know, like that's actually not the worst thing in the world. But it's probably true that they'll teach you something that you don't know, or they present it to you in a new light. I think that's a very valuable sort of experience to have. And then the other thing is that you lose trust if you start to present yourself as more competent than you are. I think it's better to sort of lampshade your vulnerability and say like, I have some awareness of this, but it's only theoretical. I haven't really worked with it in production. Like, can you walk me through the stuff that I should know? And just being humble enough to admit that you're you don't know everything is a very good learning strategy in general, but especially for junior engineers, because they hired you knowing that like you're not at risk. And I think people feel very vulnerable, especially when they start out, but that is when you're kind of the most invulnerable because it's their job to took that responsibility on. So make the most of it because you don't get much of a shot afterwards. I don't get much of a shot for that these days. Prabhanshu Atri, it's an amazing analogy. Okay, yeah, totally right. Like everything that we apply in terms like machine learning all the way down to operating systems, these are general rules that we've systematized, and we have the algorithms, we have the source code. That's amazing compared to the fuzziness of the human world. And I think if we can take those general rules and apply it to our world, I think those are just generally very interesting insights. Because those are sort of clean systems, and then we sort of apply them down to the messy systems that we are. Okay, what should be the aim when job hunting big companies or startups? It's up to you. So I actually have three categories when I talk about the job hunting section: big companies, startups, and agencies. Obviously, I think I do agree that agencies tend to be the most challenging. But these are all good starting points. I've seen people be extremely successful with all of them. Personally, I have a preference for big cos. So for me, it was down to Google or Two Sigma when I had my first job, and Two Sigma just made a better offer. Big companies generally tend to have a better junior training program, and they have a brand name, which makes your subsequent hires, your subsequent job moves easier. Whereas startups and agencies don't have that cachet with them, although they may give you more generalist learning opportunities because you have more responsibility. Big codes have the downside of, yes, they may pay well, they may have better resources, but then you might be a cog in the wheel and not do very much, which is a risk. Okay, so if you had the knowledge you have today back when you started, what would you have focused on getting better at first? Oh, wow. I got to think on that one. Holy crap. Getting better, I think, getting better at shipping projects. I'm not very good at, I'll straight up admit that I'm not very good at shipping projects from end to end. Like I can do, I can take down a Jira ticket and, knock out an issue. And that's like a 1 day to 1 week affair. But to work on something for like 3 months and be responsible for the entire stack from like, hello world all the way to the marketing and taking payments and customer support. That's something that I've only done once in my life, like right now. And I learned so much during that process that I think I wish I did a lot more of that, like shipping side projects a lot more. That's something which I've done a little bit of in terms of, I think one way to level up is to clone open source apps, and mainly that's because you get a chance to compare your implementation with other people's implementation, and also you might get the maintainers of those applications to review your work, which they have for me, and that's free learning. And I think I didn't really get that until I tried it a couple of times. It's a lot of work, but I would definitely, if I had more time, I'd do that more. Lucy Lowe, can you expand more on the differences between being a junior software engineer in finance, Two Sigma versus tech? Okay, so just to be clear, I was in finance in different companies. When I was in Two Sigma, I was a software engineer, but when I was in finance, I was a trader, I was an investment banker. Trader and analyst. Junior software engineer in finance versus tech. Yeah. I don't know how to talk about this one. So it's too general for me to give you a good answer. Like Fang itself is a massive freaking category, right? You've got Facebook on one end and you've got AWS on the other end, and they have very different audiences. So Fang itself is too huge to generalize, and it's just not a great question. So don't spend too much time thinking about that. Yeah. Since you came from finance, how do you find breaking into tech? If you don't have context, do you have any advice in terms of contacting real people at companies to show yourself in the best light possible? I'm not sure cold calling recruitment email addresses would be the best thing to do. Actually, that can help, cold calling. Let me show you this cold email that I found from the other day. Cold emailing. This guy directly cold email. Oh God, hang on. This guy directly cold emailed Evan Spiegel, the CEO of Snapchat, and he just made it right to the point. So I'm going to call this cold email, textbook cold email. So that's, check that out for cold emailing. But I mean, I don't have a lot of advice on that front because I got lucky. I did a boot camp in New York, and at the end of the boot camp, they have a hiring day. And the first person I sat down with on hiring day, that was that was the Two Sigma, my hiring manager at Two Sigma, and it turned out that I got the job with her after 2 months of back and forth. But we all have different stories breaking into tech. Mine was just a straight up career transition through a boot camp. So we all have different stories, and I think networking is always a great way. But like as long as you can pitch yourself in some unique way that makes you stand out, I think that gets you in front of the door faster than other people. We are in a very weird time right now where there have been a lot of layoffs. And so there's a lot of senior software engineer talent from places like Airbnb and Uber that will crowd out some of the more senior level positions. But I don't think you should be that worried for where you are at. And the other thing you should always be aware of is that the general demand for software in the past 3 to 4 months has doubled in every category, from e-commerce to social networking to sort of office software. I don't know what you call it, but so there's a huge demand for software engineers. You're in a great time to be in software. Stick it out. Okay, this widget. How easy or hard is it to change your field? Say you're inclined towards both core AI and software development. In 3 or 4 years down the line, you just decide to jump from one field to the other. I don't know anything about AI, so I'm not going to comment about that. I think just as a general software engineer, you have a very flexible skill set, and that's a blessing compared to other industries. Like I have friends who are lawyers and doctors, and they're not as transferable as we are. So it's good. It's easy. I'd say that. Arsalan, do you prefer crash courses over official documentation to quickly catch up? Yeah. So this is something I have a strong opinion on. So think about levels of learning. A very simple sort of tiers of learning is like 3 tiers, like beginner, intermediate, and advanced. Okay, beginners need the quickest way to get to hello world, right? Like to get from 0 to something productive. Advanced people only need the diffs, right? I know the state of the art. Just let me know what's changed. The intermediate people are the people who actually need to fill in all the gaps, and they don't like they may feel too confident. They may feel they may just like not know everything that they should know. So you take a crash course if you're a beginner, but you take the official documentation or the source code if you're intermediate. And I always encourage people, if you want to really level up, do the hard work of like read technical books from cover to cover and look out for the stuff that isn't covered that much, and people are like not even really willing to talk about that much because it's an unresolved issue. That's where you actually find the most opportunity for growth and deep investigation. Yeah. What do you think about product management, and how would a graduate set a career path aim towards that? Yeah. So I actually have a chapter on beyond your coding career. So something that maybe is not so obvious is that a lot of people actually sort of graduate from coding to non-coding. And whether that's engineering management or product management or being a founder or being an instructor or whatever. These are all interesting career paths. Product management. So I think something on the order of 60% of PMs are former software engineers. So you're actually well served if you are a software engineer. I think quite well of it at well-run companies, and I think quite poorly of product management at shitty companies. mainly because I was at a startup that had PMs where the PMs were basically glorified project managers. So part of product management is also project management, where you're sort of corralling software engineers to kind of fit towards some kind of business goals. And a lot of times, if you're not really if your software teams are not really gelling or working well with you, then you're just kind of scheduling weekly updates, asking if they're delivering there or not, or if you're not being empowered by your upper management, then you're just executing on someone else's vision, and you're not really being CEO of the product, which is kind of the selling point of product management. And the other thing I think it's is the problem with product management is that you're given, it's what they call, you're given all of the responsibility, but none of the authority, which means that nobody reports to you, but but you're kind of responsible for the P&L, and you have to wrangle by charm or begging other departments to kind of work with you to deliver some shared goals. So there's a lot of, like, I guess, political navigation that they may need to do. That's kind of like the cynical view, or you might view that as like the buck stops with you in terms of like where this sort of product or business unit goes, and you need to be able to work with senior engineers and other and senior engineers, marketing, design, whatever, to deliver something that users will love. So product management is like a very multidisciplinary thing, but you're going to be well served if you start off on the software side of things. How would a graduate set a career path aim towards that? Like study strategy, study tech strategy, the stuff that I covered very briefly in terms of business models of tech, what's horizontal versus vertical, stuff like that. I can give you a lot more resources. Just email me. I'm just type in my email over here, because I care a lot about strategy as well. So just email me more questions about product management, and I'll set you on the right path in terms of links and resources. Delivering projects early versus enforcing quality. Which one do you prefer? Does AWS have a priority among them? So I'm only 2 months into AWS, so I don't really have a good sense of the real trade-offs. I know what they say, but I'm always mindful of the difference between what people say they do and what they actually do. What they actually do, what they say they do, is that there is a high level of sort of quality enforcement. So this goes down all the way down to docs, to tests, to thinking about the different edge cases. And because AWS has 1 million products, a lot of that is the combinatorics of like, I want to ship this new feature, but how is that going to work with these other 100 different features as well? So to me, that's high quality, that you have to think about all these use cases. The other thing about high quality is that once you ship something, you have to maintain it. And AWS never deprecates anything. So that's the other thing that you gotta think about forward compatibility as well. I prefer delivering early and often, but then iterating continuously. So I don't think that's like a strict trade-off, like either early or it's good. You can deliver early and then iterate until it's good, so it's really up to you. Ayush Jain, what's the best or correct way of approaching a recruiter/employee to get a referral? So this used to be easier in the days before COVID, where you could actually ask someone to have a coffee or take a walk with you. In New York, it's really nice to ask people out for walks, because then you're not sitting all the time. You're actually out and about and enjoying the outdoors, especially now. During COVID, it's a little bit harder. Sometimes you might just need to schedule a Zoom chat, and it might just be a half an hour. Like, tell me about what you do, all, like, your day in the life and like how the company works and all that. I actually tend to encourage people to not to be too zeroed in on this referral, because they're going to offer it to you. Most like it doesn't cost us anything, and so the referral is the easy part. The difficult part is really understanding what they do, so that you have good answers when you go through the interview process and when you have to decide on which job to take. Yeah, like referrals don't cost anything. Like everyone can refer pretty easily. So that's not the issue. The issue is really understanding on a fundamental level what they do and figuring out whether that's something that you want to work on. Timur Aldridge, when hiring someone and looking at OSS contributions, how would you rate compare different projects? Are more well-known projects considered more highly? Or does it depend on how technically sophisticated the project is, or a mix of different factors? Wow, big questions. So at a very simple level, if it's a project that the company already uses or I already use, then I'm going to rate that more just because I'm more familiar with it. And it's almost like a gratefulness thing. Like, thank you for working on something that I use. And I've seen this. I have a quote from Josh Goldberg at Teachable, who says that anyone who's contributed in a non-trivial way to a project that they use at work gets an interview from him. Yeah, it's just something that people don't exploit enough. Well, first of all, it's not easy to contribute to something like a Webpack or TypeScript. But if you do it, it's not that hard. It's not easy. It's not hard. It's just not trivial. Okay, and but if you do it, then that stands very well with people when hiring OSS contributions. But at the same time, it's something that you have to surface during your cover letter or your resume, because I am not going to go through your GitHub and dig through every contribution of yours. Like, you have to tell me. So just be aware of that. Like, nobody has time to dig through your GitHub. No one's paying attention that much. Just like the other guy said, Meko Okereke from Google, just have 3, right? Just have a perfect thing, a good thing, like a complete thing, and then one with a story. And I think that's a good sort of minimum spanning tree. Is that a tree or whatever? Minimum spanning set of achievements. And if it's open source that they use, then that's even better. Big, like, so, when my first sort of big open source contribution was React, and and that's impressive, but at the same time, it takes a long while. And actually, the React maintainers now say, like, don't do that. Like, go contribute to the smaller open source project that actually need help, rather than piling in on the big one that everyone wants to help in on. Yeah, so it's up to you what strategy you want to pursue, but definitely open source is a good sort of hiring approach method. Prabhanshu, would you deliver a feature with hacking implementation or delay in order to achieve quality? Yeah, I just said that. Like, yeah, make it work, then make it right, then make it fast, right, in that order. Katal O'Callaghan, what's the benefit of a random employee spending the time on you for referral or talk about their job? I feel like it's one-sided for the student. Like, I'm a random employee and I'm spending my time with you. I'm kind of paying it forward. I hope that, you will do this for people in future, because I care about new people coming into our industry. I care about people having healthy approaches to their career. There's a lot of hustle in our career that causes burnout. There's a lot of sort of bad advice out there, so I'm trying to do my bit. So I don't know, it's just more like, sometimes you want to have a nice conversation with people who are eager about your work. Sometimes you may feel a little bit like too in the weeds with people who have so much context every day, and sometimes you might just have like a nice one-off conversation with someone who's super interested in everything you say, and that's very flattering. So yeah, it's not too hard to make that justification. Yeah, I think that's it for questions.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is there any additional questions? We still have about 5 or so minutes. Perfect. There we go. Some more coming in.
I know it's super interesting. I mean, feel free to, like, I don't know, unmute and ask this yourself, because I'm kind of reading both sides. How do you ask developers for conversations about their job or guidance? Just straight email. Email's good. Like, if you know them by like a friend of a friend, then yeah, do that. But if not, just go email or Twitter. Like, be prepared to get ignored. I'm not saying you won't get ignored, but like, that is the best way. And also, like, be able to pitch yourself, like, refer to that cold email person, but then also there's Veni Kuncha, that person. So like, be able to pitch yourself in a very short form, right? Like, what you want, and like who you are, what you want, and how they can help you, right? Like, the more specific you're asked, the better it is for people to help you. So let me try to pass this along to you. Veni Kuncha, tip, stand alone. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna pass you this so you can pitch yourself. So pitch yourself. There you go. Okay. Karthik, How do I approach about the referral at the end of the conversation though? Like, hey, we talked and stuff, now give job. So most, just mention the word referral somewhere in your conversation and they'll pick up on that. If they don't want to refer you, then they won't offer. And you can take that hint and just, that conversation probably didn't go that well. Otherwise, like, yeah, like, again, it's sometimes, yeah. So first of all, just like make sure you mention referral somewhere in the conversation and they'll pick up on that you're also trying to get a referral. But like, again, like that's not the sole purpose of the conversation, right? You genuinely want to learn, and you genuinely want to have fuel for future conversations. Like one other really good thing to get out of, like even if you do not get a referral, one other really good question that you can ask at the end of a conversation like that is, who else should I talk to, and have them refer you to their other friends or people who are a better fit to talk to you, to sort of talk to your interests, and sort of mining the social graph rather than just getting that system referral, because that's one referral, but like having more people actually speak up for you, that's also very valuable. Ayush Jain, do you prepare for data structure and algorithms for job interviews? Is there a fun way for that? I don't know if there's a fun way. You can sort of gamify it, with points and stuff. I was a friend / beta tester of algoexpert.io before they were famous. And that has like a nice completion system, which is nice. So, I mean, long story short, I spent 2 to 3 hours a day on that. And I'll be honest, like I only used it at my Google interviews. Every other job that I interviewed at didn't really use traditional algos and data structures. They still had technical interviews, but it wasn't like, write a min heap or something, like it wasn't that sort of classical textbook algorithm stuff. It was just more applied onto specific problems. So fun way for that? Not really. Just know that you are actually going to have some points in your career where you actually use this knowledge. It's not just for interviews. And that day will come and you'll be thankful that you studied this stuff. And to me, that makes it fun. Nice pizza. What do you think about referrals? What does that mean? Nice pizza. Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah. Mentioning referrals. Got it. Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's I think that's that for my answers. Look, like I don't know if I have the best answers, but feel free to have that conversation with me. Like, email me. Happy to, answer. I may not answer right away. And I tend to try to answer in public so that my answer with you can be shared with other people who have the same question. But I strongly believe that, I think we need to have more conversations like this from people who've, are a few years into their process to people just starting out. So that's why I'm here. Thanks, Leah. Bye. Thanks for having me. Have a nice day.